Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our funeral service today, I'm going to kindly ask that we turn off or silence all cell phones or electronic devices. Thank you.
Welcome. Today we are assembled in loving memory of Donald Rosenblit. Our hearts go out to Don's family, Lori and Elliot, Scott, Devin and David, Jack and Charlie. May each of you find comfort in the companionship of those who surround you now. May you be sustained by the good intentions of all who would offer you solace. Loss and sadness are not alien to our Jewish tradition. In such a time of grief, the voice of the poets calls out to us. Leida hi reshit uvtira tachlit. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, and life is a journey, from childhood to maturity, and youth to age, from innocence to awareness, and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. We welcome Rabbi Micah Peltz to lead us in Psalm 23.
Thank you. On behalf of everyone at Temple Beth Shalom, we send our condolences to all of Don's family and our love to all of you in support at this time. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, bino deshe yarbit seini amem minochoti nahaleni, nafshi shovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo, gam kelech b'gei salmavet lo ira ra ki ata imadi, shivtecha mishantecha hemei nachamuni, taroch lefanai sholcha neged sorarai, dishanta b'shemen roshi kosi revayai, ach tov v'chesed yirufuni koyemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai leorech yamim. Those are the Hebrew words of Psalm 23, also known as the Shepherd's Psalm, a psalm that guides us through difficult moments like this one. I'd invite you, if you'd like, to join me as we recite it in English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
A midrash from our tradition compares the day of one's birth to the day of one's death. It tells the story of two ships that pass one another in the harbor. One ship was coming in and the other was going out. Yet the people at the dockside spoke of praise only of the ship coming in. The rabbis ask, why did they praise the one coming in and not the one going out? They answered, we are praising the ship that came in because we now know that he went out in peace and has returned home in peace. As to the one now going out, we do not yet know his fate. Thus we are taught, when a person is born, we do not know what the nature of his life will be. We do not know the places he will go or the people whose lives he will touch. But when he departs the world, we know and we appreciate his life's journey. Today, we welcome a ship home. When we remember Don, we think of the journey that was his life. Born in 1927 in Philadelphia, connecting with others was in Don's genes. His sister cared for him because his parents, Jacob and Ida, worked as club owners, and often it was not until the middle of the night when they could come home for special family dinners. It was at their club where they were among the first to welcome African American performers, and they risked their business to do so, eventually needing to move to Atlantic City and start over when Don was a teenager. Don graduated from Syracuse University, now an enduring family tradition and family story. For it was there that Don not only made lifelong friends, but developed his creative career, wrote his acclaimed show, White Bucks and Tails, and cast the performer who would become the love of his life, Lynn. He couldn't believe how beautiful she was, and she couldn't believe all he saw in her. Together, they built their life. 50 years later, they returned to Syracuse to perform a reunion show. After graduation, Don headed to New York during the exciting early days of television. And then, rather than taking the Hollywood route, even though he might have enjoyed some fame, he took a job at an advertising agency here in Philadelphia, where his family brought him more joy than fame ever could have. Don delighted in sharing with his family about his earlier work, with a spotlight on his client, McDonald's, where he even had the chance to stand in for Ronald McDonald. He constantly created, such as Rottweiler, Private Eye Dog, in Collywood. He did love puns. A character invention and novel, screenplay, an entire world Don created and brought back to develop in later years. Don's love of the creative arts guided his commitment to Philadelphia Theater Company, which he served as president and then as ongoing supporter as it moved into the Suzanne Roberts Theater. Don's adoration for Lynn shaped his family life, and they raised Lori and Scott in New Jersey before returning to Philadelphia once the kids were grown. As a father, Don was caring, active, and when it came to Lori and Scott's interests, he was all in. As Papa Don to Devin, Jack, and Charlie, Don was supportive, wanted to know about their lives, related to them as a friend, and felt valued as a source for advice. Don created a life of fun, even for the years he cared for Lynn when she developed dementia. He preserved his beloved's beautiful look and her dignity. With Lynn's death, Don's life changed completely, yet he found a way to translate his passions into this next chapter. Don remained the person who loved to bring people together for common purpose and connection, especially in times of vulnerability and coping, sharing his humor, creativity, and compassion. From his very official Procrastinators Club, Don't Pay Your Dues or You'll Prove Yourself Unworthy of Membership, to rooting for his teams, to pride in the impact of mentoring students at Thomas Jefferson Hospital so they could better understand chronic illness, his passions endured. At Independence Place, Don served on the social committee, the Green Committee, edited the newsletter, administered the Facebook group, and encouraged elevator conversation to go beyond just the weather. Most of all, he was there for people, especially in times and in a stage of life that can feel lonely. Seeing the isolation so common, especially for people with mobility challenges, Don enlisted others who rode in scooters as he did, although perhaps none as fast, and formed the Wheeler Dealers. We're on a roll, with bumper stickers and everything, rolling up to people to ask, "You want to join the gang?" No wonder he was known as the mayor of Independence Place. What a legacy, and we'll hear from that legacy now. Don inspired deep love in his precious family, and they will share with us today, beginning with his daughter, Lori.
Can everyone hear me okay? Blue Diamond sweetened vanilla almond milk, honey wheat twisted pretzel sticks, 5 lemons, the greenest bananas I could find. I've noticed that my grief is the sharpest when I look around my father's kitchen. You see, I've been bringing him groceries every week for the past couple years. Lemon ginger tea, honey, extra large. 6 bottles of black cherry ice, cinnamon raisin bagels. The groceries from my last shopping trip sit untouched. I brought them over on Wednesday. My father collapsed the next day and died several hours later. Charmin toilet paper, Bounty paper towels, adjust a size, Haagen-Dazs butter pecan ice cream, frozen blueberries. My visits tended to focus on the various small chores that my father needed done around the apartment. Usually while I was there, my father kept an eye on whatever game was playing on the large TV in his living room. But Wednesday's visit was different. Cinnamon applesauce, large. 3 sweet potatoes. A roasted chicken, but make sure it's plump. Borsari spice mix. On Wednesday, my father and I sat together, just talking. His attention uncharacteristically focused solely on me. When I asked him how he was doing, I noticed a brief flicker of concern pass behind his eyes. You see, he normally says something like, "I'm doing fine, good actually." He asked me how he would know when it was time to call in an aide to help him with his daily needs. I told him we'd know if he started to have trouble getting dressed, showering, making his meals, or moving around the apartment. He let me know that he didn't think he needed that kind of help yet, but that things were getting harder for him. We sat there for a few more minutes, just looking at one another. I knew it was a moment to be cherished. I told Elliot when I got home that my dad and I had a really special visit that day. Panera butternut squash soup, Sabra roasted garlic hummus, Arizona iced tea with honey ginseng, Quaker Oats variety pack, oatmeal. That visit on Wednesday was the last time I saw my father upright. The next day he collapsed, and died 17 hours later, peacefully and surrounded by family. Until the moment he fell, my father lived independently and fully. I know it wasn't easy. He needed oxygen 24/7. He had slowly and somewhat reluctantly acquiesced to the changes in his routine, like selling his car, using a mobility scooter or walker, and of course, letting me bring him groceries. I've thought often over the years about what my father's last days might be like. I imagined him becoming dependent, his world shrinking, and him suffering through end-stage lung and heart disease. I find myself feeling incredibly grateful that my father died the way he did, when he did. A proud and independent man, he left this earth having learned some painful but beautiful lessons about vulnerability and accepting the support of others. He wasn't ready to go, but he understood it was his time. I find great comfort in the thought that he stayed with us as long as he could be independent, living a full and interesting life. My dad's last words to his friend Bernie were, "Don't call 911, I have a dinner date tonight." Thank you, everyone, for being here today. My father would be so moved to feel the love and support in the room. I know he is smiling down on us in a twinkle in his bright blue eyes as we share his remarkable life story and the impact he's had on so many. Although our hearts are broken, let's embody my dad's favorite quote, the one engraved on my parents' headstone. Don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. Thank you. And go Birds.
Don's son, Scott.
Check, 1, 2, check. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. With all the wonderful things that are being said today about Don, I kind of feel like it's my duty here to dispel the myth that while he was indeed the greatest, most fun, caring, lovable, creative dad, he was no Father Teresa, okay? Don't get me wrong, his good qualities far outnumbered his not so good, but he wasn't perfect. Like, for instance, and everybody knows this here in this front row, let's talk about the dishwasher. He was a dishwasher dictator from day one. Anyone who's ever helped him clean up after dinner has experienced this. The small spoons go here, the bowls go here, the plastic spoons, which he saved and inexplicably washed over and over again. No, those go right there. I know everybody has their own dishwasher style. Some of us might load it like a rabid raccoon, but Don was downright military about it, and it didn't get better as he got older. It just got quieter. He would just shuffle over, stand next to you, and just give you the look. That's all it took, and you just knew you were doing it wrong. Or, how about the temperature level he kept in the apartment? Oh, I don't know. Is it a crime to set the thermostat to 83 in the summer? When the EMTs came to assist him on Thursday, they were like, of course he fainted. It's 211 degrees in here. To be fair, his reasoning was that his favorite chair was right next to the AC unit. So what did he do? He covered the AC vents with like 20 years worth of Philadelphia Inquirers. Probably some bulletins in there too. Fine for him, but if you weren't within the 3-foot comfort zone of the chair, you were in subtropical Center City. Also, one more thing worth noting to that point. For a guy who kept his living space like a long simmering saucepan, he had more sweaters than anyone should ever be allowed. He had like 4 t-shirts total, but he had like an entire Macy's worth of sweaters. Or, how about the intense pressure he always put upon some of us to rub his feet? This is not a new thing, by the way. I'd be in 6th grade and he'd say, I know you have to cram for that really important social studies test, but priorities. And then he'd just put his foot right up on my leg and wiggle his toes. And no matter how much practice I accumulated in all those years, it just was never quite right. He'd be like, you're doing it this way. Do it this way. And it wasn't just the feet. It would escalate pretty quickly to the back, neck, and scalp. But thankfully, I like to think that I can credit all that foot rubbing for helping to increase the strength and stamina in my hands to allow me to become the guitar player I am today. Lastly, and this is hard for me to talk about, it's the extreme punishment that he inflicted upon us all. And by punishment, I mean his puns. In his mind, there was no such thing as a bad pun, and he just took that philosophy and ran like Usain Bolt. You could just see the pun forming in his brain in real time. He'd be like, I tried to catch some fog once, but I missed. I'd call him up and I'd say, how you doing, Dad? And he'd say, hey, did you see how I responded on Facebook to so-and-so's post about how they were afraid for the bear that got into the hot tub? The comment he wrote was, you're scared, wet fur. That's wet for. I think it was supposed to be for what's for, what for. And I'd always say, that's a good one, Dad, that's a good one. And then we'd build on it like some kind of bad pun Jenga. And I'd say something like, because the results would be grisly, and it would just keep going and until we ran out, which we never really did. And I know for a fact that one of his greatest regrets is not having lived long enough to be reading the comments you've all written on his memorial page and literally loving all of his own responses. Did you see how I replied to Jody's comment that I was loved because I always brought the love? His reply would be something like, I thought it was because I always brought the lunch. And I'd say, that's a good one, Dad. That's a good one. In all seriousness, he is, among other things, the mayor of Independence Place, mentor to so many, promoter of building happy hours, designer of flyers, consummate conversationalist who encouraged people to actually speak to each other in the elevators, writer of Best College Musical of the Year, chairman of the Philadelphia Theater Company, president of Marketing Communications Executives, president of the Delaware Valley Stroke Council, captain of Race for the Cure, head honcho of the Wheeler Dealers, his scooter motorcycle gang you've just heard about, whose goal it was to bring mobility impaired people together to avoid them feeling isolated, and of course, caregiver extraordinaire to our sweet mother, Lynn. In addition, I'm just going to add this last few things to his resume. Occasional Ronald McDonald emergency stand-in, creator of Collywood, author of The Lunatic, president of the Procrastinators Club. I'll get around to that one. I am becoming him. Transformation is almost finished. He's relentlessly positive, and like Lori said, a supremely stubborn, tough guy who told the EMTs, I can't go to the hospital, I'm supposed to meet friends for dinner. I can also say with 100% certainty that he would have loved knowing that I kind of roasted him at his own memorial. Although he probably would have said, you went with the blue suit, huh? Isn't that more for like a business meeting? To which I would have said, it just so happens that my black suit was at the cleaners. Couldn't you just have waited a few more days? To which he almost definitely would have replied, I tried, Scotty, I tried.
Don's grandchildren, Charlie, Devin, and Jack.
Hello, my name is Charlie Rosenblit. Sorry, my dad just went, so I have to. Sorry. I have the honor of being one of Papa's grandchildren. I consider myself extremely fortunate to have had Papa as my grandfather. In fact, I often found myself bragging about him to my friends or really anyone who would listen. So now I'm just going to take a few moments and use this opportunity to brag about him to you all. Just share a few quick stories about just how great of a grandfather he was. First off, might be a little underrated, but Papa was quite an athlete. Whether it was on the tennis court, the golf course, the lacrosse field, Papa was always able to excel. And this was especially clear during some of our family vacations to Long Beach Island, in which Papa would often stay with us for a day or two. And while the other kids and I would spend hours bodyboarding on the waves, Papa was always right there with us as a self-proclaimed body surfing expert. And, the kids and I, we would ride in the waves as far as we could, thinking we got as far as possible, and we would, pop our heads out of the water, but you could always just see Papa's gray hair glimmering in the distance, riding all the way into the shore, and we would just be shocked. And I was always so excited whenever I had the opportunity to introduce Papa to my friends, who wouldn't be, and not everyone has a grandpa as cool as I did. So, one of my friends, Dan, would come down to Philly with us once a year, and every time I would wake up in the morning and I would find Dan and Papa already finished with their bowl of cereal, talking about the Flyers' third line and the current MLB standings, just hanging out like two old buddies, and it was just, it was really great to see that. And another one of my friends, Tommy, he once stayed with me at Papa's apartment. And Tommy was a member of the Sigma Alpha Mu fraternity. And for those who don't know, Papa was a proud Sammy himself. And when we arrived at the apartment, Papa greeted Tommy with the fraternity's secret handshake, as only Papa really could. And Tommy described it as one of the coolest moments in his life. And, it's just one of those things that just really makes you proud to have such a great grandfather. And speaking of cool moments, some of my favorite memories include going to the link with Papa to watch our Eagles play. Papa was a season ticket holder for about 30 years with amazing seats. And being from New York, I'm often asked why I'm such a devoted Eagles fan. And my answer still remains the same, that I was raised right by my grandfather. So, those games were really some of the most incredible memories, moments of my life. And even as recently as last week, we would always make sure to call each other throughout the season to talk ball. Who else am I really supposed to talk to about the Eagles' backup left guard? So, I could go on and on about just how special he really was. I could tell you the story about how he helped to invent the Shamrock Shake, or how he always had cool cars and, even gifting me one when I needed it. But really what I'm trying to say is that my grandfather was a truly remarkable person who led an exceptional life. He was incredibly creative and funny, extremely generous and caring, exceedingly smart and adaptable with the times, and above all, relentlessly positive. And I'd like to just leave you with one of Papa's favorite mottos, which I encourage you all to live by as he did. Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you handle it. I truly believe that if we follow this advice, it would make Papa proud. And I think that's all we really want to do. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Devin, Don's granddaughter and oldest grandchild. My memories with Papa were filled with joy. When I was a toddler, I spent every Tuesday with Papa and Gigi in Philly. We banged pots and pans and marched around the house and spent time coloring with chalk at our favorite Three Bears park. It was always a treat to have sleepovers, eat ice cream, and watch TV, especially the channels I didn't have at my own house. My time with Papa established my love for Philadelphia and city life in general. I loved getting on the Patco train out of Cherry Hill and adventuring around the city with Papa. As a kid and teenager, it was exhilarating to spend time around the bright lights of Broad Street as his date to Philadelphia Theater Company plays and galas, or to sit in what felt like the best seats in the house at an Eagles game. Whenever I spent the day with Papa, our proximity to culture, art, and interesting people made life exciting. Sitting for hours in Washington Square Park and watching people and dogs alike, I felt like we were one of the same breed. No pun intended. And wherever we went, Papa always proudly introduced me to his friends, fellow board members, or people who knew him just because he went out of his way to say hello, learn about them, and build community wherever he went. That was Papa in a nutshell. He was the star of the show, sometimes literally. Everyone loved him, and he made you laugh. Being by his side, I felt that glow. I was always honored to be his plus one. Papa's creativity was also top tier. He could make a pun out of pretty much anything, wrote multiple screenplays, and most recently a book that's currently available on Amazon. He crafted an entire universe run by dogs called Collywood, with animated characters, merch and all. He loved to sing, and some of my favorite memories are belting out Frank Sinatra and dancing in his apartment. His passion for the arts was especially significant because it led him to the love of his life, my Gigi. Papa wrote a classic song called You Just Can't Be My Date that we love to sing to this day. Later on, I followed in his footsteps by enrolling in Syracuse's School of Communications, and in college, we shared our Syracuse pride wearing matching sweatshirts and reminiscing on his days in the Sammy fraternity and as a lacrosse player, even if it was short-lived. At my graduation, Papa, in his stylish pink polo, insisted on coming to the bars and taking a tequila shot with me and my friends, loving the attention from the ladies. And yes, Papa was also a ladies' man. He deemed himself a silver fox and genuinely looks like Bill Clinton. A few years ago, Papa created a dating profile on Match.com. When my mom went to look at the profile, she discovered that it was written from her perspective, unbeknownst to her. Papa, the advertising expert that he was, thought this technique would lead to more ladies showing interest in his profile. I'll miss Papa's joy, his jokes, his cuddles, and that he felt not just like a grandpa, but like a friend. Every time I'm walking through the bright lights of the city, sitting on a park bench for hours, or making a corny pun, I'll be thinking of him. I love you, Pops.
Good morning. I'm Jack, Pop's other grandson. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Speak up, yeah. We've always been lucky to have Papa Don as a grandpa. But for me, I feel like it was really over the last 2 years that I really got to know him as a person. Living here in Philadelphia and knowing his health was in decline, I started going over for weekly visits to his apartment. We'd eat a takeout dinner and sit around watching an old movie or a baseball game while I scratched his back, of course. If the TV wasn't too loud, he would tell me about his week. I'm so busy, he would always say, recounting his many social projects at Independence Place or his adventures with the Wheeler Dealers, and ask me about my week, where he was always quick to offer advice. Most times, it was the same guidance every time. Stay positive. That might sound like a cliche, but coming from him, it was powerful. Papa's relentless positivity is what kept him resilient through the past 2 hard chapters of his life. And he loved to share that. Last year, as you heard, he was invited by his care team at Jefferson to speak with a group of medical students as a mentor to share with them his experience living with a chronic illness and how that might help them in the medical field. He savored the opportunity and expanded his philosophy for the students into a 4-point program for living a good life. Number 1, stay positive. Number 2, exercise. Number 3, stay active mentally and socially, which we know he did. And number 4, laugh a lot. The visit went so well that the hospital gave him a whole other cohort of students to mentor, and he loved that. I think he showed by example how true these points are, and he would want everyone to learn from them. Papa also knew how to enjoy life. Like Devin said, he loved music and appreciated beauty. You could see it in the way he took care of our Gigi in her dementia, making sure she was dressed, color coordinated, and made up just as she would have wanted. Or you could see it in the look on his face when he took the first bite of a really good cannoli. But I saw it most when we listened to music. Papa always had his TV on, some news or sports game, but when the programming was mercifully boring enough, or he was reminded of some song from our conversations, he would call out to his trusty companion, "Alexa, play Sinatra, Benny Goodman, Andy Williams." Then we'd just sit on the couch and listen together. The beautiful music of that era, resplendent with swelling strings and dramatic woodwind flourishes, would fill the air. Papa would close his eyes and listen. Memories from some bygone time flooding over him, or otherwise he'd look pointedly at me with those magnetic blue eyes and sing along. Many who know Papa know he loved to sing, breaking into some old tune over dinner at home, out at a restaurant, in the park, Thanksgiving, really anywhere. He would often say, with both a sly wink and a genuine sigh, "You know, I could have been a crooner." He'd recount one of his favorite stories from his youth in Atlantic City. He stepped on stage at the middle school talent show with a Sinatra song and costume, whipping the crowd, and especially the girls, into a frenzy. By his take, at least. Don often looked back at his life and wondered if he could have been something more. If he had followed his friends to Hollywood after college instead of moving down to Philadelphia and starting his family with Lynn, "I could have been a contender." That was his favorite quote from the waterfront. But over the past few years, I stopped hearing that line from him, which I sort of appreciated because it's like, what are we, chopped liver? You know? But I think he had learned to appreciate what he had become and what he had built, that he was somebody and he'd made a beautiful life. Papa was somebody to us, his family, and all the many communities he had built along the way, from the Procrastinators Club to the Wheeler Dealers. And certainly to Gigi and Lynn, the love of his life, who he cared for to her very last day. And while we've always known that, somehow it feels like it took his illness, gradually relieving him of the layers of self-identity that we all put up as protection between ourselves and the world, to finally reveal this truth to him himself in a way that he could fully, deeply, and wholeheartedly appreciate. That was a sad and beautiful thing. In those moments on his couch, with some silent baseball game on the TV, and the exquisite strings of Maria or My Way hanging in the air like sunlit dust, him either sitting with his eyes closed or singing along with all the power he had left, I think he could feel it, all of it. The thrill of his youth, the pain of loss and heartbreak, the poignancy of memory, and the beauty of love. In those beautiful melodies were spoken all the things that could not be said, could never be put into words. It was a privilege of my life to share those moments with him. Now, Papa might have hated this, but I have a little clip I wanted to share with you all. He had said, "I'm losing my voice," and the doctor told him to keep up singing, to keep his vocal cords active. So with the lyrics pulled up on his phone, he began one of his favorite Sinatra tunes, Send in the Clowns. It's a very sad song, but I think he liked it for its irony, its embrace of humor, even in the darkest moments. His voice wasn't as strong as it once was, and a little pitchy, but you can still hear his passion and his trademark vibrato. So if we can, I'm just going to put it up to the microphone for a minute and we can listen.
Me here at last on the ground, you in the air, sending the cloud. Isn't it bliss? Don't you approve? One who keeps tearing around, one who can move. Where are the clowns? Sending the clowns. Just when I stop.
Ah, he said at the end of the clip, I'm losing my voice. Nah, Pop, I said, it's just 'cause we just ate rice pudding. It's bad for the vocal cords. And he laughed and agreed, always staying positive. On one of our last evenings together, he confided in me a recurring dream. I'm a big dreamer, he said, and we all know that he was, in different ways. He said, Lynn and I are at a resort just outside Atlantic City. I picture them so close that you can hear the sound of the ocean, just like he could as a young man. It's 4 o'clock, and all of a sudden, someone comes in and tells us it's time to leave, but we haven't even started packing our bags. We all know that Papa Don lived his life to the fullest and would have continued doing so till he was 101 if he had had the chance. But since his time has come, what he would want is for us to all live ours. Thank you so much.
Let's take in all of those beautiful words with a moment of reflection. Hamakom Yenachem Etchem Betoch Sha'ar V'Letzion V'Yerushalayim. May God console you among the mourners of Zion and all people. May his memory be a blessing. And together we say, Amen. We continue with our blessing of memorial El Malei Rachamim. Please rise. El Malei Rachamim, Shochin Bamromim, Hametzeh Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utorim, Kezohar Harakia, Mazhirim, Et Nishmat David Lezo Ben Yaakov, Shalach Leolamo, Baal Harachamim, Yastirehu beseter knafav leolamim. Vitzror bitzror hachayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato. V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo. V'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Donald Rosenblit, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. Please be seated. Interment will follow this service at Locust Wood. The family will sit Shiva in Don's building at Independence Place in Philadelphia this evening at 5:30 p.m. with a service at 6 o'clock p.m. and tomorrow evening at 6:30 p.m. with a service at 7 o'clock p.m.
I'd like to ask if we could rise once more.
Sa'inai el haharim me'ayin yavo ezri. I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and coming, now and forever.